This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Kia ora, Trudy here in Dr. Barb's absence. Because Dr. Barb's mum passed away last week. So this episode is dedicated to Mary Anderson of Branch Creek, Cardrona. And it is the episode we produced around dementia. This is a very trying illness for those who not only suffer from it, from the families and the caregivers and friends. So we'd like just to take a moment to thank all those people involved in Mrs. Anderson's care, and our thoughts go out to her friends and families during this time. But also we'd like to thank everybody who works in this area, who support and who have family members suffering from this illness. We like to think that our thoughts and wishes are with you all.
Welcome to the OI podcast, the Otago Institute podcast, in-depth conversations with experts from the worlds of arts, sciences and Mataranga Māori. Brought to you by the Otago Institute, the Otago branch of the Royal Society for Arts and Sciences. Kia ora, I'm Dr. Barb, and this is the second part to our Coping with Dementia mini-series, and we are very, very lucky to have in the studio today Yoram Barak. Now, have I said that right?
You're perfect.
Associate Professor. Thank you very much for coming today here, Yoram, and welcome.
Thank you. Entirely my pleasure.
I'm going to go through the illustrious career that has led you to Otago here. So a undergraduate at Tel Aviv School of Medicine, general adult psychiatry, advanced learning in old age psychiatry, clinical director for Holocaust survivors for 25 years. That must have been quite an experience.
It was very, very painful and challenging, but I think that as Holocaust survivors aged in Israel and across the world, we became more and more aware of the enormous psychiatric range of disorders that they suffer from. It was, I think, a journey for them and for us, the teams that were trying to help them, in realizing that the myth that was perpetuated by the State of Israel in the 1950s, that if you survive the Holocaust, you're going to be great, you're going to show the world that, you're alive and that you're a resilient survivor. As Holocaust survivors aged, it became painfully clear how vulnerable and fragile they are. It was a very painful journey for all concerned.
Yeah, and I guess it's quite a societal trope in some ways that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and, trauma makes you, surviving trauma of all sorts makes you stronger. But of course, it leaves scars, and I think it can't help but. I
think I'm not happy you brought that up, but I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one of the worst misconceptions we have as a society. What won't kill you will make you stronger. That is absolutely not true. Studies from all over the world, and this is a universal finding at any age, trauma will weaken you. Yes, there is post-traumatic growth, and we try to encourage that. But for most people who survive severe enduring traumas, their journey for the rest of their lives is not only marked by the trauma, they are more vulnerable, both physically and mentally. One of the earliest findings from prisoners of war of the Second World War or Holocaust survivors is they have a huge burden of diabetes. And you think, hey, yes, but the body speaks. It's trauma, not only to the mental apparatus, but also to the physical apparatus. And to say nothing of the straightforward high rates of death by suicide of prisoners of wars as they age, Holocaust survivors, and it probably a whole different podcast, but one of the things we were unaware of as a profession and as people is the immense price of trauma that the German and Austrian civilian population paid for the Second World War. They were bombed, conquered, starved. it wasn't fashionable to study the perpetrators. So nobody looked at that
Yeah, it's interesting.
terrible impact of the war. So we know that, on whichever political side you are in a conflict, you and your children are going to pay a heavy price because trauma is also intergenerationally transmitted. So it's far from a great idea to have people go through traumatic experience as a way of strengthening them. It is terrible.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say about the effect on their bodies, because of course we have this tendency as a society to think of mind or mental issues as somehow separate and completely different from physical issues.
Again, as you say, it is more of a misconception amongst the general public or lay people. But already in the 1970s, a collaboration of two brilliant American psychologists, Holmes and Rahe, developed the concept of life events. They wanted to rate any and every life event, sort of judgmentally bad ones like going to prison, or good ones getting a promotion, or losing someone you love, or being involved in a car accident, or whatever, any life event. So they mapped hundreds of life events and they rated each from 1 to 100. That is the size of the impact of the event on your life.
Yeah.
So, for example, the worst life event a person can have is losing a partner. That's rated 100 out of 100. Losing a child is 99 out of 100. Getting a parking ticket would be sort of 1 out of 100.
Yeah.
It's a life event, but not really that terrible. So they rated good and bad life events, and then they looked at hundreds of thousands of Americans, and they scored their cumulative life event score, if you like, over the year preceding the study. So some people had, sort of a boring life in the year before, so they scored very little on the life events. Some people, lost someone and were in an accident and went to prison and got in trouble with their mortgage and, so they scored very highly. And then they followed them for a year to see what is the impact of cumulative life events. And they expected people to develop depression or to be suicidal. The only correlate was increasing rates of cancer.
Wow.
Our bodies do very badly with trauma because trauma indirectly but very powerfully impacts on the immune system. Most people don't realize that the main communication between our brains and our bodies is carried out through the immune system, not through hormonal systems or neurotransmitters.
Wow.
The immune system is hugely impacted by life events.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. And I guess I would have been in one of those people who just, depression or alcoholism or I don't know,
you would
all
think,
the
but
things.
no.
Because you sort of think, that is really interesting. So the main kind of correlate was cancer rates.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm. And longer follow-ups showed that the second main correlate would be heart attacks.
Wow.
And you know that Japanese published around that time the syndrome of the broken heart.
Yeah.
Literally, the broken heart.
Yeah, and that makes sense. If losing your partner is the number one biggest event, that actually kind of just crazy.
I'm not sure my ex-wife would rate that as 100, having divorced me, but no, I'm joking. I'm not joking. She did divorce me, but I don't think that. It's very personal, but it is surprisingly consistent across cultures and countries that losing a partner is probably, and losing a child, is probably the most negative life event a person could go to. Surprisingly, a lot of studies from the continent, mainly from Germany, show that is followed by being fired, losing your job.
There's a lot of sense of self-worth goes in your job, I think, in your occupation. And
that is possibly more of a Western cultural issue.
Yeah.
And maybe more to do with gender as well.
Could be.
Men define themselves very frequently through their jobs.
Yeah.
You ask someone, tell me about you, and men would say, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm a builder. When you ask women to tell you a little bit about themselves, they would usually start by motherhood, partnership,
Oh, I see. I'm a quantitative ecologist.
their place in the social network, and how they are embodied in a social context rather than what they do.
Yeah, and I guess that depends on the society and who you're talking to and how you're talking. Hey, following that, degree in Gestalt psychology, in Buddhist psychology, and a master's in health administration. What is Gestalt psychology?
When I was a young consultant, it was mandatory for psychiatrists to be able to do psychotherapy. It wasn't sort of the split that we see nowadays in many health systems.
So psychotherapy, just to be clear, psychotherapy is counselling?
Way more complicated, if I may say, than counseling. Psychotherapy started as Freud's The Talking Cure, psychoanalysis.
Right.
That was the first psychotherapeutic intervention.
It's always your parents'
in
fault.
modern times. Most practitioners of psychiatry and clinical psychology have moved away from the classic 5 times a week, 50 minutes on the couch with the psychoanalyst sitting, sort of at the head of the couch, and you are freely associating or telling your dreams. We've moved away from that, not because it's not powerfully efficient, but because the cost is just immense.
Right.
How many people can afford that? So we have developed in the Western world various forms of shorter psychoanalytically oriented therapies. That is, psychotherapies that are based on the assumption that Freud outlined. For example, that there is a large unconscious element to what we feel, do, choose.
Right. Because, my understanding of Freud just doesn't go much further than a Freudian slip, where you say something that you don't mean to say. So, because unconsciously you're thinking it.
You mean to say, but you don't realize that you mean to say.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is that. No, but Freud, essentially what he said is that there is if you like, a secret, whole emotional, cognitive life that we are unaware of. Call it the unconscious or the subconscious or whatever you want. So in a sense, our psyche, our psychological makeup is like an iceberg. There's a little that we see above the waterline, and there is a lot that's hidden.
Right.
And in order to help people improve their lives, reduce their symptoms if they're unwell, we need to explore the underlying elements of the psyche and the drivers of anything and everything. So psychoanalytically oriented therapies have that as the founding principle, but the practicalities of how you go about exploring the unconscious differ. So some people go straight to what Freud called the main highway to the unconscious. We hypnotize them.
Right.
But that, again, is time-consuming and not very popular.
And does it work?
It works.
Have you been hypnotized?
Of course.
Wow.
I'm a psychiatrist. Part of my training, yes. But other people still stick with dream interpretation as the main road to the unconscious.
Yeah.
An Australian group of psychotherapists developed humor therapy, where they believe that how you tell jokes or what makes you laugh and what makes you funny also comes somehow from your unconscious. So, like, they would ask you, what's your favorite joke? And you tell it, and then they would point out that there are elements of whatever it is that they find in that. Because humor is one of the greatest human psychological defense mechanisms.
Oh, that makes sense, actually, yeah.
So Gestalt therapy, answering your question, was developed by Fritz Perls, who was one of Freud's students and followers. He had to leave Germany, just like Freud did, during the Nazi era because he was Jewish. He went to South Africa, where he observed many of the ritualistic and traditional healing processes by sort of shamans in the different tribes. And he came away with the idea, and he then went to California, made his way to California, became nearly a cult leader. He was greatly adored by his followers, by his students, and he developed a form of intervention that is mainly based on elements of enactment and drama. And he is most famous for what we call the empty chair intervention. So he would sit you in front of an empty chair.
Yeah.
And you think you have maybe issues with your mother, okay? He says, okay, here's your mother. Imagine her sitting there. What do you want to ask her or tell her? So I would ask my mother in the empty chair. I would say, Mom, how come you have never once in your life literally said, I love you? Okay? Which is true. My mom never did.
Ah.
She was a very, very efficient woman, but not very emotionally expressive.
Interesting. And
so she was great in what we call instrumental raising.
Right.
We had food. She would check our homework. Our school uniforms were always clean. But, hugging or kissing or telling you she loves you, not in
done.
this lifetime.
Yeah.
So you would ask that question. Then Fritz Perls or me or any Gestalt therapist would say, okay, take a few minutes to think about it, and then stand up, go sit in the empty chair. Imagine you are your mother. Now you answer. Think that you're sitting here. Here you are your mother in the empty chair. What would she really say? So you answer. And obviously whatever you answer represents a bit of your wishes or what you long for. So you start exploring these kind of conversations.
Well, that sounds tricky doesn't it?
Well, you have to be a Gestalt therapist to walk through that, but it is very beautiful.
And the therapist sits there and helps.
Yes, you
because I imagine that's a very tough discussion with yourself.
It is. So there is a therapist, of course, the Gestalt therapist, and sometimes it's Gestalt therapy is enacted in groups, as a group therapy.
Oh.
So one of them, I'll give you an example, a moving moment for me going through my own Gestalt therapy in a group of Gestalt therapy students, if you like, our leader, if you like, or the teacher was a very, very, very brilliant man, a Holocaust survivor himself, and we were talking about families in the group, and he referred to something I said about my family and my feeling, even as a very young boy, an adolescent, as being sort of on the periphery, not really part of the family, but just sort of. And I even bought a photo of our sort of my grandparents and my parents and my brother, and sort of one of those, classic family photos that they used to have. And everyone is there, and I'm sort of
off to
on
the
side. And he said, okay, fine. Pick from the group who would represent your mother, who would represent your brother, who would represent your grandfather. Place them in kind of a, mobile, the way you would want your family to be.
Uh-huh.
So I placed, my father and my mother, and then he said, where would you be in this family? I said, in real life or in my wishes? He says, let's start with your wishes. So I went in there and I placed myself where I would really love to be. And he called one of the other people and said, you be Yoram. He placed him where I sort of found myself comfortably. Called me to stand next to him and said, have a look at that. That will never happen for you in your life. Now we need to talk about how to get past that. So that was really powerful. You could see what you want and how it will never come true, and how do we start walking through that pain? So that's Gestalt
It's interesting.
therapy.
Wow. Whew. So how did you then came from Tel Aviv, from Israel, to New Zealand, to Associate Professor for Old Age Psychiatry at the School of Medicine here at Otago University, and also at the same time a consultant for the closed-in patient services for older patients struggling with psychiatric disorders, which is here in the public hospital.
And you were asking how I came
How
here.
did you come to be in New Zealand?
Oh.
Yeah.
That itself is a podcast. But
Okay, we won't ask that.
No.
We'll just assume you're here and move on.
No, but very shortly, I was. My wife and I are Buddhists. We were Jewish, obviously, by birth, but we moved away from Judaism. We're deeply embedded in the Buddhist way of life. So after about 25 years, my wife said one day, enough is enough. You need to take a sabbatical. You're going to burn yourself out. You can't just keep going day in, day out. The longest time off I took in those 25 years was a week. So she said, enough is enough. You need to take a sabbatical. So we went to the Burmese Myanmar embassy in Tel Aviv and said, we would like to volunteer to go to Burma, to Myanmar, and open a memory clinic because they have very limited resources to help.
And a lot of trauma there as well.
Yep.
There's a lot of war coming
And they
through.
said, oh, lovely, but we can't pay you. I said, that's fine. My sabbatical from the Tel Aviv University, whatever I get paid is enough. Burma is not really expensive to live in. But then for personal reasons, someone in our close family was struggling with cancer, and he asked us to be there for him. He was terminal and palliative care, and to be there and be with him for the journey. So a year later, or just over a year when he passed on, we went back to the embassy, but by then they had another one of those military coups.
Yeah.
And the new military, whatever government, did not understand. They said, we are quite suspicious. What do you mean you don't need money? You're going to pay your own to volunteer? They were not very happy.
Right.
So I called a friend of mine whom I met at the Institute of Psychiatry in London. We were both trainees in old age psychiatry. He is now considered to be the world's greatest old age psychiatrist. Professor Subi Banerjee is the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Nottingham University and the only man in the Western world who holds a professorship in dementia studies. A brilliant, brilliant man, just amazing. So I called him and said, hey, Subi,
Where can I go?
my Myanmar project fell through. He was aware that we were going to volunteer. He said, listen, I just had a call from Christchurch. Someone there wants to go on a sabbatical, and they're looking for a locum to come in for a year. I said, great, thank you. Give them my details, and I'll be happy to be contacted. He said, oh, I will. No worries. They'll contact you. So I went home, and I told my wife, hey, we're going to England for a year. She said, where? I said, Christchurch. So she Googled, and she said, there is no university or hospital. It's a small place, I think, in the south of England. And then I had a call, and I realized
That it was Christchurch, New
Christchurch is in New Zealand. And I was like, God, where is New Zealand? Somewhere after Australia?
Or before, depending on which side you come
depending
from.
on which side you come from. So we went to Christchurch, where I spent 18 months in the most amazing, amazing service. It was the Princess Margaret then, and then we moved to Burwood, and they have the old age psychiatry service in Christchurch is one of the top 10 services in the world. It was such a pleasure to be with some of the most amazing people there. And then the dean here, Barry, who was then the dean of School of Medicine, called me and said, listen, we haven't had an academic clinician, old age psychiatrist here for quite a while. Would you like to come in and
Interesting.
sort of be part-time teaching research and part-time consultant? So, we came here, and, they have all those interviews and committees and da-da-da. And then it was Friday evening, and we went for dinner with Professor Paul Glue, and was, he's New Zealand's most brilliant psychiatrist. Some people say maybe one of the top people in the world when it comes to ketamine and psychedelic research. Anyway, we went to dinner, and it was lovely, and he's brilliant, and it was funny. And then Saturday morning, we wake up. I go jogging, and it snowed overnight. But I thought, oh, well, so,
you decided you loved Dunedin.
And we went to the farmer's house, came back, went to the room, packed, went down, and the guy says, where are you going? I said, back to Christchurch. He said, no, you're not. I said, what do you mean? He said, SH1 is closed. I said, surely we can drive around to Milton or something. He said, no.
No, you can't drive around.
Can't. So we had
So we trapped you here, and that's how Dunedin got you. Wow, there you go. Hey, we ought to get on to dementia and coping with dementia. Let's start off with an easy question. What is dementia? And I hear incorporated in that people talk about different types of dementia, and I wondered if you could clarify first what is dementia and then the differences between the types.
Okay, so I'll be happy to do that. By the way, dementia is a word that is no longer formally used in scientific publications. The American Psychiatric Association found it to be stigmatizing.
Okay, so what do we say now?
Major neurocognitive impairment.
Major?
MCI for short. MNI, sorry.
Major
neurocognitive
impairment.
So MNCI, if you like. But that's only for scientific publications. Everybody says dementia.
They do. Yeah.
The name is not going to go away.
And I think there's a little bit with that with Alzheimer's and dementia as well.
Yes, so we will hopefully clarify that. The Americans find dementia stigmatizing because, literally in Greek, dementia means not thinking.
Right.
Well, obviously, people with
thinking.
Alzheimer's are thinking. They're not thinking. It sounds really terrible. And also, just like the word senile in English,
right.
dementia and senile have become quite derogatory.
Yeah.
When you say someone is senile, you mean he's not aging well.
Yeah.
While the word senile in Greek simply means old.
Oh, right.
It doesn't come with a
It doesn't
judgment.
come with the same judgment. Yeah, it's interesting.
So,
because I wouldn't have put the same derogatory on dementia as I would on
in the US,
connotation.
if somebody says, oh, come on, you're demented, they mean you're a bit
right, yeah.
sort of crazy, not in a nice way.
Yeah, and I guess for me, dementia and demented are quite different, but maybe it's the Harry Potter thing with the dementors.
Maybe, and maybe the US probably.
The US are a bit weird though, isn't
yeah,
it? Sorry.
They
a bit different
they
sometimes.
They invented their own form of English, didn't they?
Exactly. That's totally what I mean to say. Like, not weird, just that their English has different connotations sometimes.
And
sorry for all the.
So back to dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term, and it encompasses well over 130 different disorders and diseases that have very similar presentations. So the word dementia is, if you like, you can think of it as fever.
Right.
Okay? Just because someone has fever doesn't mean we know what the cause is. There are hundreds of causes of fever. You could have pneumonia, or you could have an infected cut in your hand. So dementia is the umbrella term of a large group of diseases and disorders. All of them have in common several things. One is memory impairment. The other is that all of them, by definition, are progressive.
Right.
So it's not like someone who had, let's say, had a stroke. So if you tested them, their memory before and after, you would probably see a change. But that change is not going to progress further.
Right.
There's a loss of function, but it's now going to be stable.
Then it stays the same, and it's not
with
getting
dementia,
worse over time.
it's always progressive.
Right.
Always. So performance decreases, cognitive performance and memory and other functions of the higher cognitive functions get worse over time. Not by definition, at the moment, there are no cures for any of the dementias.
Yeah.
So there is no cure for any of the dementias.
But that's not part of the definition. That's
No,
just the
but
state of play at the moment.
yeah,
and obviously lots of people are working on that.
You'd be surprised how much money is put into that. And last but not least, all the dementias are, in a sense, I don't want to sound the alarm, are terminal illnesses, because all of them shorten your life expectancy.
Right.
Not very quickly, like very rapidly malignant cancer,
Yeah.
but they will shorten your life expectancy.
Right.
So we're looking at a group of disorders, the great majority of which, well over 90%, are age-associated, and age in and of itself is usually, especially for Alzheimer's disease, a risk factor. The older you are,
The more likely you are
to suffer from
some sort of
Alzheimer's
dementia.
disease. Mainly, but other dementias as well.
Yeah.
So, so this is the group of dementias. We didn't, explicitly say that, but I'm hoping everyone understands that not necessarily the origin, but the pathology leading to the presentation of dementia is in the central nervous systems.
Right.
You don't have dementia because your kidneys are not functioning.
Yeah.
They may affect some cognitive processes indirectly, but dementias are caused by a damage to the central nervous system.
Yeah. Which is your brain and
Just your brain,
Just your brain.
not your cord.
yeah, just your brain.
Yeah.
And can you just go back to cognitive impairment and just
So but basically, our brains have complex and simple functions. The complex cognitive functions are, for example, abstraction or communication. Language
Right.
is a very complex function.
yeah. So thinking things and thinking
Synthesizing new information.
yeah.
There are some cognitive functions that are more basic and they are necessary across all cognitive outputs. For example, memory.
Right.
You can't navigate well, literally in the world,
Yeah.
if your memory is very badly impaired. You
Right.
won't find your way home.
Right. And some people have a bad memory to start with. And
That's news to me.
I think you hear it, and it could be one of those myths again, right? So you hear it like, oh, I can't, I'm useless at remembering things. I'm always lost. I can't find my way home ever. Those sort of conversations that you hear.
We could talk about memory for next
let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Hours. But what you are referring to is what we call declarative memory. Memory for, if you like, facts.
Right.
Your date of birth.
Right.
Or what is the name of the street in which I have to turn right before I go home to the whatever. So this is declarative memory, remembering, if you like, items of information. But that's only a small part of our memory. Just think, if I gave you something to smell,
Yeah.
and you would go, that smells like oranges.
Yeah. That's a memory, right?
Of course.
I have to have smelled oranges.
You have smelled oranges, and your sensory memory would have to remember
Right.
that. Just like if I ask you to close your eyes and I placed a coin in your hand, you would probably be able to say this is something made of metal.
Right, because I
There's
know
a
what metal.
sensory memory. You wouldn't say, oh, this is something made of paper.
Yeah.
You would if you had advanced dementia. You wouldn't be able to
Right.
walk through other memories. And when a piece of music plays,
music is the
you
same,
go,
yeah.
oh, that's
Yeah.
whatever, 1812 by Tchaikovsky or whatever.
Yeah. And some of that, I guess, I think, when we do pub quizzes, some people are better at remembering facts.
Yes, which is only a
small part.
small part. Declarative memory is not a big deal.
Right.
And it's fine, but it's good for communication and basic human relationships. It's necessary, but it's not a major player in our functioning in the world.
Right. And I guess the other thing is...
I mean, just think how many men don't remember their anniversary.
It's terrible. And they were there at the wedding.
Yeah, and they were there, eh?
Well, presumably.
Well, dragged into the venue anyway.
So you hear lots of... once you start talking about dementia, you hear things like vascular dementia and Lewy body dementia and Alzheimer's and frontal lobe dementia.
So that's the long, long list of 137 at the latest update.
How important is it to get an actual diagnosis of which of those types of dementia that you or your loved one has?
I would say that's an unfair question. There is... Some people are cynical. They say, since you have no treatment and no cure for any of the dementias, who cares?
Right.
Why go to sometimes very complex, sometimes invasive and even painful and costly diagnostic procedures if at the end of the day you're going to tell me that I have dementia A or dementia B, but you can't do anything for me?
Yeah.
So some people are very cynical about that. I think it is a terrible mistake to be a cynic. That's not a good way to go through life. But it is terrible to be cynical about the accurate diagnosis unless a person, a loved one, and their family are very clear that they do not want to go through the process, which is fine. We respect that.
Okay.
But if they are not outright against it, we have to be able to say that for various reasons. A, the trajectory of progression differs between different dementias.
Right.
People want to know that.
Yeah.
If you have Alzheimer's disease diagnosed at the age of 80, you are likely to have, unless you die for other reasons, 6 or 7 years of life ahead of you.
Right.
If you, unfortunately, have vascular dementia diagnosed when you're 75, you have about 3.7 years ahead of you.
Right.
People want to know that. They want to plan their life. They want to understand.
And I guess it also depends...
And that's just one aspect of it. The other aspect, of course, is that we do have symptomatic treatments which differ in their efficacy for the different dementias. So we need to know that. So if you are, which is something very common amongst people who are struggling with the different dementias, if you have low mood.
Right.
And
so low mood, sometimes people, again, I'm going to say this is going to be, I'm going to say it, and I'm expecting the QI klaxon here. A lot of people say low mood or depression.
Mm-hmm. So depression is very common after the diagnosis of dementia and not as a reaction to the diagnosis. It's not like you've been told that you have Alzheimer's disease, you go home and you say, God, life sucks. What am I looking at?
So it's part of the dementia as opposed to a response.
In your brain, yes.
Right. As opposed to a response to having the diagnosis.
The response obviously is not going to be, yay, but I've got Alzheimer's. But yes, it is a very important part of just so depression can happen in about 40% of people as they go through their journey with Alzheimer's disease.
Which is quite high, isn't it?
On the other hand, an apathy syndrome happens in about 70% of people who are struggling with frontal temporal lobe dementia.
Wow. So apathy is just not caring about anything as opposed to being low mood?
Apathy is not caring and also mainly losing motivation. It's like, the grandkids are here. I'll stay in my room. Someone who loved them and used to play with them, and now it's... So that may be a good example why we would need to know if you have Alzheimer's disease, because if you seem to be less motivated, then I would need to think, maybe driven by depression. What can I do for that?
Right.
How can I help with that?
And
but if you had frontotemporal dementia and your wife tells me, he used to love gardening or taking walks now, I say, hey, why don't we drive down to the beach, take a walk? And he's like, no. I need to think apathy, interventions, treatments, are different, etc., etc. So
it's
I think it's really important. And last but not least, I know people don't like to hear that, especially after COVID, with all the fake news about what physicians and big pharma do to people, the whole anti-vax nonsense. But in order to potentially develop either disease-modifying drugs that will maybe slow down the progression, or maybe even cure or prevent dementia, we can't develop a generic drug that would be good for 130 different diseases.
Right.
What we need to develop for Alzheimer's dementia is different from what we need to develop for frontotemporal lobe dementia or Parkinson's disease dementia or dementia associated with AIDS.
Yeah.
So, if we don't make that diagnosis and then offer people participation in clinical trials, we'll never get ahead of the game.
Yeah. And I guess it's interesting because even though at the start of the show you started by saying, there's no cure for dementia and it's a progressive disease, that doesn't mean that there's no treatment that can help alleviate the symptoms. And I think that's quite a big distinction there.
And there are so many treatments, pharmacological and non-pharmacological, that can help both slow down the progression of the disease, but definitely improved quality of life both for the patient and their loved ones.
Right.
Just think, sleep disruption, a major issue.
For both the carer and the loved one, I imagine, because if your partner's awake all night, then you're awake all night.
And the next day we look much worse. And so sleep or many, many other issues that people struggling with dementia and their primary caretakers, their loved ones usually, have to face. So there is so much we can do and help with. The Alzheimer's Society here is amazing, and they are a great first port of call for people and their families.
And I guess the other first port of call is your GP.
It is. GPs are amazingly brilliant at both diagnosing dementia and starting you on the pathway of treatment. I think, having said that, and they really are, I mean, one of the problems GPs struggle with is sort of the bad news issue. So not infrequently, geriatricians or neurologists or old age psychiatrists are asked by GPs to validate the diagnosis. And that's their way of saying, we know what's happening, but we want you to give them the bad news.
I guess also when there's something that's got no cure, then they want to be sure because, you can have some of these symptoms, but it might be a differential diagnosis of, I don't know what what are the differential diagnoses?
Oh, huge, endless,
yeah.
Endless,
Anyway, and with something that is, life-changing for everybody involved, I can sort of see them, as well as wanting to kind of make, but to actually make sure that they're right.
I just think that, with our very, very limited resources in the health system, unfortunately, Fatora expects GPs to do anything and everything. They're supposed to be super physicians. And it's a question of how you want to weigh the investment. Do we want to invest in primary care, making diagnosis and the initial treatment of the different dementias, and referring to specialists or tertiary care centers only in what we would call atypical presentations or people who are not responding well to interventions and treatments? It's a question. Different health systems try to solve that differently.
And I guess the other thing is when on the journey you get the diagnosis as well. So there's people talk about early onset or mild dementia stages, moderate stages, and advanced or level 7. There's all sorts of different techniques. And I guess that part of that is because it is a long journey sometimes.
Oh, years and years.
Depending on the type of dementia there as well. And I guess some people don't get help.
Too many. So yes, I'll put aside what you mentioned about young onset dementia, because that's not when you get the diagnosis, that's at what phase of your life cycle you're diagnosed. That's different. On average, in most Western countries, and New Zealand is probably no exception, maybe even a little worse, the delay between obvious symptomatology, obvious at the beginning of the journey, to people who know you really well.
Right.
But obvious symptomatology and a formal diagnosis is anywhere, the delay is anywhere from 18 to 20 months. 18 to
20 months, right. So that's coming up for
because
2
a lot
years.
of people are unaware and they go, oh, well, a bit of memory loss, that's natural. It comes with age.
And I mean, that's true, isn't it?
Good God, of course not.
No, so you wouldn't expect memory loss at all with age?
None whatsoever.
Oh, right. Okay.
People who are physically and mentally well actually have, if they invest correctly in cognitive training, if you like, actually have an increase in their IQ, in their intelligence until their late 80s.
Wow. Mm-hmm. See?
We all have a hope yet.
Myth busting right here.
So what happens is, again, as we age, there's only one natural, if you like, change in the way our brains remember. Our brains need more time to process information. So if you take a group of 20 years old and you read a paragraph to them, and then you ask them questions about what they remember. A paragraph from a book.
Yeah.
And you ask them, in paragraph I just read, what is the name of the person who was wearing green pants? And they would all go, John.
Right.
If you read that paragraph to a group of 90 years old, they would perform prima facie worse than the 20 years old.
Right.
So you think, we're losing our ability to remember with age. No. If you read the paragraph much slower and then tested the 90-year-olds, they'll do just as well as any 20-year-old. So what happens is that our information processing speed is somewhat slowed down. So we need more time to process the same information. But once we are given that time, remembering the information is just as good as a 20-year-old.
Interesting. Hey, we might run out of time. Can I get you back for another interview to do a second one in a row?
Well, I guess you could, if you promise me that we are going to talk about successful aging.
Yes, we will.
We need to talk about that.
We need to talk about successful aging.
Because there are so many brilliant breakthroughs in that area.
Yeah. And I think it would be...
Some of them made here in studies of centenarians here at the School of Medicine with the brilliant Professor Paul Glue and Professor Robin Turner and myself.
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic. And I would love to talk about that. And I would love to talk about, there's just so many things. I would also like to go through some of the modifiable risk factors, because I know there's a lot of research coming out in that area.
And a group of psychiatrists led by the brilliant Professor Gary Chung in Auckland have actually shown what at first sounds bad news, but actually New Zealand, because of the unique combination of risk and protective factors we have as a culture and as a country, we have a greater chance of preventing dementia than any other Western culture. Yes.
That's good news.
About 40 to 42% of dementia cases are preventable.
Wow.
In New Zealand, we estimate it's more like 50% of cases are preventable.
I would throw a lot of money at that if I was in government.
Am I allowed to say anything about politics?
No, we're an apolitical show.
I won't. Yeah.
Just general things.
We would love to have...
But I think here...
We would love to have any government that seriously invests in prevention rather in the creation of complex and expensive repair shops that come into play way too late.
Yeah. And
I mean modern hospitals. That's what they are, aren't they?
Yeah.
Expensive repair shops.
Yeah.
I mean, I walk in one. I shouldn't badmouth that.
But they have their uses, right? They have their uses and they need their...
But they do not have a significant impact on public health.
Yeah. So, and we have had discussions with this before. We had Pete Hodgkins on, and he was, huge advocator for the new Dunedin Public Hospital, as we all are, I'm sure.
We all are.
But also, the number one thing is preventative public health, and that's a big thing.
Just think, if we not only invested in building the new hospital, but also in getting rid of Fatty Lane here.
Yeah.
You know Fatty Lane?
Fatty Lane. Do I know Fatty Lane?
Yeah, well, all the students go for McDonald's, KFC, pizza. No. We call it Fatty Lane. Now, just imagine if all that kind of ultra-processed food was not available.
Yeah.
But
we will come back to that in the next show. Hey, thank you.
As will people in Wanaka who are voting against having a McDonald's.
Yeah, and fair enough.
Fair enough, yeah.
And right there, as it comes into the town, honestly, it's ridiculous. Anyway, we will come back to you, Yoram, and we will come back to part 3, the second part of Yoram Barak. And we will go through all of those risk factors and ageing well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Kaki. You've been listening to the OI podcast, the shout out for the arts, sciences and Mataranga Māori.
You can support this podcast by becoming a member of the OI. Check out the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences on Facebook or our website.
If you'd like to listen again to this episode or others from the series, look for the OI podcast on OAR FM's website, oar.org.nz.
Brought to you by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, the Otago branch of the Royal Society of New Zealand.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.